So before we get started, I wanted to try something really cool and really new, and it's just a quick trivia question. And I'll give you the answer to this trivia question at the end of the video, so you're gonna have to watch the entire video or just fast forward the entire video to find out the answer to the question. And today's trivia question is, how many actual models of the iPhone are there in existence since the first iPhone in 2007 to 2020? What's up guys, Orain here. So this is another support video that we're going to be doing. Now this question technically is not a tech support question, it's a question about technology, but it was such a good question I didn't want to surpass it in any way, and I think it really does hit home in 2020 with releases of different smartphones coming out in 2020. And the question basically is, with the release of phones like the new iPhone SE that's rocking the A13 Bionic chip, one of the latest chip that Apple has in its smartphones with a marginally good camera, but a steep price discount, is it still worth spending $1,000 on a smartphone in 2020? I have some thoughts and we're going to go over it in this video. So without further ado, let's get started. Now when I got this question at first, it really got me thinking, because with companies like Google, Apple, even Samsung releasing mid-range to budget phones that in a lot of ways stack up to the higher priced flagship phones, is it still really worth spending $1,000 on a smartphone in 2020 moving forward? And it really got me thinking that I really don't think there is a reason to spend $1,000 on a cell phone. And when you dig into the reasons why the flagships cost more than the mid-range or the budget phones, you really fall into three specific categories and where those phones kind of excel over the mid-range and budget phone. And one of those key areas is, no surprise, the camera itself. The camera seems to be the biggest technological jump that companies now focus on when it comes to smartphones from year to year. So when you're looking at a budget device versus a mid-range or versus a flagship device, what you're going to see is a steady jump in the way the camera performs, not necessarily the pixels of the camera, but the bells and whistles that are kind of thrown into the camera system to entice consumers to purchase that particular phone. Like for instance, you take a look at the iPhone SE that features a single rear facing camera. That's it. It's a 12 megapixel wide angle camera that has an f1.8 aperture, optical image stabilizer, supports Smart HDR, and is fully optimized by Apple for that smartphone that is a budget phone, but it's still just one camera lens. If you juxtapose that to the iPhone 11 Pro or the 11 Pro Max, where you have a 3 camera setup, you have that telephoto, the wide angle, and the ultra wide angle lens. You can see that there is a big difference in the camera technology from a budget phone to a flagship phone. And Apple's not the only company that seems to put the emphasis on their camera system when it comes to differentiating themselves from budget to flagship. You have the Galaxy A51, one of Samsung's lowest of the line budget phones. Its main camera is a 48 megapixel joined by a 12 megapixel wide angle that supports a 123 degree view and a 5 megapixel macro with a depth sensor. If you look at the newest Samsung Galaxy S20 that was released, that's released with a 12 megapixel main shooter, a 64 megapixel telephoto, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. And if you go even further than that to the S20 Ultra, you have a 108 megapixel f1.8 camera with periscope, 48 megapixel f3.8 camera, and a 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide camera. And you can kind of go through the list of like Google, any of those phones, Oneplus, those companies seem to focus a lot on their camera system to differentiate their flagships from their mid-range and their budget. And that is a service to the consumer, because if you're not really too interested in the camera, like somebody like me, I love having a great camera, but I only really need it to be serviceable at times. It doesn't have to be the greatest camera around, and that really opens up the field for the phones that I can purchase because the camera itself doesn't interest me as much. If you're not looking for a great camera, then you definitely open yourself up to some of those budget and mid-range devices, because the cameras play a big role in why the flagships are the flagships. Now, the screen actually is another of those three main factors that differentiates it. And you can see that some of these companies also tend to downgrade the screen just a little bit, to be expected when you go into the middle or budget type phones. But if you're looking for like an iPhone with a Super Retina X HD display with a wide color gamut, vivid true life colors, deep blacks, and a contrast ratio of 2 million, then you're spending $1,000 on a cell phone. But if you're okay with an LCD screen that supports 1080p or 720p, then you will find yourself in a mid-range to lower costing device and not have to spend $1,000 for those specific features. This is actually where Android actually has a little bit of a benefit over Apple. Some of the budget Android phones do have really awesome QHD screens that Apple seems to just use the Liquid Retina LCD display on their budget to low end phones. So if you are an Android user, you still have the ability to get a marginally great screen with 1080p support standard without paying $1,000. The options are still there. Like for instance, if you look at the Pixel 3a, it has an OLED 1080 by 2220 with an 18.59 ratio versus a POLED 1440 by 2960 on the regular Pixel 3. And you also have the difference between Corning Gorilla Glass 5 on the regular Pixel 3, where the Pixel 3a has a Dragon Trail glass. So you can see aftermarket versus brand name seems to be the thing when it comes to the screens. But again, if it's something that you can deal with, then you do have the choice to go with a lower priced phone. And I know a lot of people tend to look at the specs of the screen and say that they want the latest and greatest, the best screen. They can't settle with an LCD or 720p. One of the things I did find is that the longer you use a screen, the more ingrained you get with it, the less you actually see the difference between it and another screen. Sure, if you're coming from a super high quality screen, it'll take your eyes some time to really adjust to what this new screen kind of looks like. But I do feel the more you watch it, the more you use it, the more your eyes actually just get fixed. And unless you're standing right next to someone with a better screen, you don't really see the difference that much because you're consuming your content on your screen on a day-to-day basis. And the third place where they really differentiate themselves are with all the extras, like the bells and whistles, like the under the display fingerprint scanner, or the IP water and dust resistant rating, or the wireless charging. The more of those bells and extras that these smartphones have, the higher the price gets to be kicked up more and more. But one of the places you may see that there isn't really much of a difference is one of the places where it really matters the most, and that's the processing power. A lot of these budget to medium range smartphones have either close to or the same processing power as their flagship counterparts. So they can handle just as much multitasking, just as much usage without all the bells and whistles, the great camera, or the fantastic screen. Like for instance, both the S20 and S10 Lite have the exact same processor as their more expensive counterparts. The new iPhone SE has the exact same processor as the iPhone 11 Pro that came out last year. Even though it's like slightly underclocked, it's still a fantastic processor in a phone that costs less than the iPhone 11 Pro. And that's not even to bring up the point that if you simply just either wait a year or buy the phone that came out a year before, you're getting pretty much a flagship device with flagship internals, the screen, all the bells and whistles that you're looking for at a cheaper price. And so that brings us right back around to the question at hand. Is it really worth spending $1,000 on a smartphone in 2020? And I can probably say that the answer is no. There's so many other options that you can take. There's so many other roads that you can kind of travel down. Now, if you do want everything brand new and all the latest and greatest thing, if you're that person, then yeah, you're probably going to have to drop $1,000 on a cell phone. But if you're the person that doesn't mind your screen not being the best screen that's out there, it's consuming your media on it, you're good with that. You don't need all the additional bells and whistles. You don't need it to actually have an IP water and dust resistant rating. Just know that it is water and dust resistant rating. They just didn't put a stamp on it. Or you don't need a wireless charging, or you don't need the best camera system with 100x zoom and 100 megapixel camera. Then you can probably, or most definitely, find a phone that won't break the bank within your budget. Especially nowadays, if you simply just wait a year, you'll get a flagship at a cheaper price. Maybe if you only wait like 6 months, actually, the way the cell phone cycle goes. Anyway, guys, I want to pass the question off to you. In this climate of of budget and mid-rangers, do you think that it is necessary to spend $1,000 on a smartphone to get a great smartphone? Go ahead and comment in the comment section down below the video. Share your thoughts and comments down there as well. And while you're down there, why don't you go ahead and hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, with that subscribe button and that bell for notification so you don't miss when we release some cool, helpful content like this one. And to quickly answer our trivia question before we wrap this video up, there are 25 total iPhone models, and that's starting at the iPhone Gen 1 back in 2007 to the iPhone SE 2, or just SE, that was released this year in 2020. It's a lot of iPhones, but it's not as much as I thought. I actually thought there were a little bit more. Until next time, guys, you can check out a review we did on the Samsung Galaxy Note. I know it's been out a while, but we did a kind of re-review on it here, and this is something that YouTube believes you'd enjoy watching. Thank you so much for checking out the video, and as always, stay safe and peace out.